Okay, so I am Samantha Harris, and I'm with Congressman Jim Renacci's office with John Thompson on July 13th in Parma, Ohio. So I think we're just going to start out with some, biographical details, it says here.
Sure.
So where and when were you born?
Born in St. Petersburg, Florida, September 18th, 1959.
And who are your parents and what do they do?
Ned Oliver Thompson, I didn't know him. My mom was divorced when I was young. I met him once as an adult, that was it. And my mother, Roberta Jean Thompson. My mother was a secretary her whole life. She raised us, my brother and I.
Was it just you two?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm ahead of myself here. So who was your
fine.
brother? And did they serve in the military?
My brother was, his name was Paul Mason, and yes, he did serve in the military. He was in the Navy as well.
And what were you doing before you entered the service?
Student at Lakewood High School, studying vocational graphic arts.
So did you enlist right out of high school then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I had a job briefly with a company called Minuteman Press, and that wasn't going anywhere. And the owner's father talked about his Navy adventures, and I thought, oh, that sounds pretty cool.
Very nice.
And in 1977, they wanted to enlist people because nobody wanted to enlist back then. So on my way home, I walked by the recruiter's office and I said, "What can you do for me?" And they said, fresh meat. That was pretty much it.
Now, could you maybe elaborate on why people didn't want to enlist then?
It was towards the tail end of the Vietnam War. I mean, the Vietnam War was over by then, of course, as your history major here will attest to. But the military wasn't a popular place to go. Most high schools didn't encourage military service. I believe they still don't for the most part, just my opinion, what do I know? But the military is not a bad place to start. It helped me get my current job, so it's not that bad.
All right, and which branch of the military did you serve?
Navy.
Okay, and I guess we covered this, so you enlisted.
Yep.
And why did you choose the Navy?
Well, again, because of the owner where I worked at Minuteman Press, Mr. Coldessar, he talked about his Navy adventures, and I thought, well, this sounds interesting. Plus, I enjoy traveling. I like meeting new people in different countries and cultures and things like that. That was fun.
Very nice. And what happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days?
Let's see. I was given the choice of San Diego, Great Lakes, or Florida, and it was October, and I knew it was going to be cold, so I said, well, Florida's the closest, so let's go there for boot camp. So I went to boot camp. That was 8 weeks long. It wasn't that bad. To be honest with you, it was pretty easy by most standards. But a short, pudgy kid from Cleveland, it was a little bit difficult for me. So I did that. The memorable story on the way home, we're flying back in December of '77, and there was a really big snowstorm here. So when we flew back, we were supposed to fly back from Florida directly into Cleveland. Well, they diverted us to Detroit. So there was a bunch of us that were from the Cleveland area. So we're in Detroit, and we're like, well, how are we going to get home? Well, they said, well, we'll put you on a plane the next morning. They put us up in a hotel. We got up the next morning, and the salesman said, he saw all us young Navy guys in our uniforms. He said, hey, if you'll help me push my car out of the snow, I can take us to the airport, and we can get on this small plane, and it'll take us to Cleveland. I said, great. So we pushed him out of the snow. There was about 4 of us, if I remember correctly. We got on this little small plane, and we landed at Burke Lakefront Airport.
Nice. It's good to know that Cleveland weather was as unpredictable back then as it is now.
Yes.
So do you recall your instructors? What were they like?
Senior Chief Engineman Jack Bridgman, yes. And ACC Young. And Senior Chief Bridgman was an old Navy guy. He was on PBR's Patrol Boat Riverines, which means Brown Water Navy. You probably heard of it, or maybe I have heard of it. But he was great. He was terrific. Terrific instructor, terrific leader. There was another assistant company commander. What was his name? Rick Banning, who I went to high school with. He enlisted before me, and if you're top in your class, then they sort of recruit you, so to speak, to be an assistant company commander, and he helps out with training you. And so Rick told me, he says, you got to volunteer for something, no matter what. You can't just be one of the 80 guys in your company. you got to volunteer for a position. So I volunteered to be the religious petty officer, is what they call it in the Navy. So I would go to all the services, make sure the guys knew what services were available, and sort of herd them, Protestants here, Catholics here, Jewish people here, what have you. And there's different Protestant faiths, and you can go to the different services.
So I guess this is sort of right in line with that. Did you receive any specialized training?
Not in boot camp, really. It was what they taught you.
Okay.
When I went to boot camp, I had no desire to go to school. I just graduated high school. I was done. I wanted to go to work, And when I joined the Navy, I figured, well, I'll make some money and go to college when I get out of the Navy. Well, 20 years later, I was still in the Navy. I did 20 years in the Navy.
Oh, wow. So how did you adapt to military life? So that includes, your physical regimen, barracks, food, social life.
Adapting. Pretty much do what you're told. If you shut your mouth and do what you're told, you'll be fine. I mean, really, that's all there is to it. If you do what you're told, if you try to buck the system, then, the nail that stands out gets hit with the hammer.
Right.
You've probably heard that story. That's what happens. So just do what you're told and you're fine.
So was that easy for you to adapt to being told what to do?
It was. Yeah. If you take care of the Navy will take care of you. That's what they've always said.
All right. So where did you serve once you were past boot camp?
Okay, after boot camp, I went to, another story. This is kind of funny. So I went into the Navy with what's called a guaranteed A school. So your A school is your first basic school for your specialized training. So I looked at a book and they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a gunner's mate. I want to shoot the big guns. I didn't know they didn't have those at the time. The battleships were decommissioned at the time. So I thought that would be fun. So when I was in boot camp, they said, okay, well, what kind of a gunner's mate do you want to be? I said, well, I didn't know there was more than one. They said, well, there's GMGs, they work on guns, gunner's mate guns. GMMs, gunner's mate missiles, they work on missiles. Or GMTs. So what's a GMT? He goes, I don't know, but you have to have a top secret clearance to do it. And dummy me, I said, yeah, that's for me. So then after boot camp, I went to what's called A school for about 8 weeks in San Diego. I got my A school training, and then I was assigned to the USS Midway, which is now a museum in San Diego, which I would like to go see at some point. So being assigned to the Midway, the aircraft carrier, it's home ported in Japan. So when you go on leave, if you want to come home and see your family, it costs about $1,000 round trip.
Oh, wow.
So what they allow you to do is go what's called in the hole. You get 30 days paid vacation a year. So you could take your 30 days paid vacation ahead of time before you shipped out to Japan. This way it wouldn't cost you as much to fly home from California, have your leave, see your family, do your thing, see your friends and everything, and then fly off to Japan. And so that's what I did.
Nice. All right. So if you served abroad, what are some of your memories that you have of that experience?
The Midway, Japan, met a lot of nice people over there. The Japanese people are really, really nice. They're really friendly. They're polite to a fault. They really, in my opinion, at least they were when I was over there. Let's see, when I was stationed in Japan, we went to Korea, Thailand, Australia a couple of times, Hong Kong several times, Singapore, Kenya, Mombasa, Kenya. We were all over the place. We were a forward deployed unit of the 7th Fleet. And if there was something going on in that neck of the woods, the Midway went there, because that's what you do when you're forward deployed. For example, when they took the hostages in Iran, which I believe was in '79 off the top of my head, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember the correct date or time, but '79. We were on routine patrol off the coast of Africa, basically. So they took the hostages, so the Midway was called on, okay, now you have to stay on station longer and not make a port of call where you can have liberty and get off the ship and do whatever. No sightseeing, guys. So we had to be ready to do whatever it was we needed to do. And during that particular deployment, we won, well, we were awarded, we didn't win, we were awarded the Navy Expeditionary Medal, which was the first time it was ever given out since World War I. And that is the medal that makes me a veteran. I have others that make me a veteran, but that was the first one.
And how was that medal allocated? Like, Why was it awarded to you?
It was awarded because we were in a wartime footing.
Okay.
Basically, is what it means. We were ready to go. We were building up. The guys in the ordnance department were building up what are called MERS and TERS, and they were getting bombs on racks and ready to go. They were loading up. They were getting ready for war, in case that happened. I mean, we don't.
Right.
Nobody wants that to happen, but you know, that's my job. Get ready for war.
Right. So, did you ever see combat?
Nope. Well, yeah, sort of. But in the Navy, you really don't see it unless you're a SEAL or something like that.
Okay.
You don't shoot it with people. But the only time I saw combat was I was in Grenada in Lebanon. So when Grenada happened, we were on our way over to a med cruise, where you go away for 6 months. Basically, you go over to the Mediterranean, steam around over there, show the flag, do what you're supposed to do, and then you come back. Well, we were on our way over, and then my division officer comes down and he rounds everybody up, and each of the division officers got their divisions together, and they said, okay, we're going to Grenada. Okay, what are we going to do in Grenada? They explained the political situation, and we had to get ready to supply what's called naval gunfire support. I was a gunner's mate guns at that time, and my job was I was in charge of the forward gun mount, Mount 51. And so I sat in Mount 51 24 hours a day. They would bring me food, and the only time that I could leave the gun mount is if I had to go to the bathroom. That was it. Other than that, I slept up there, I ate up there, I did everything up there.
So I guess how was that for you? Like mentally, you know, sitting in the same spot nonstop, that's gotta be tough.
It's not that bad.
Really?
The ship is shaped like a V up front on the forwards, you know, the front of the ship. I mean, you can see it from the outside.
Yeah.
And in that V, there's beams. And sailors are very adaptive, if nothing else. All sailors are adaptive. You take a foul weather jacket, you wad it up, you put it in that beam, and you lay there against the beam, and you can actually kind of just lay there, and you're not sleeping, but you're resting. You don't have to sit. You know, you don't want to lay on the floor. But that's what you do.
Wow. I don't think I could do that.
You'd be surprised what you can do.
So, what did just your daily regular duties look like?
Daily regular duties when I was first in the Navy. Let's go back to the Midway briefly. On board the Midway, I worked on classified ordnance initially, and then after that, the ship got a BPDMIS, Basic Point Defense Missile System for self-defense, and I wanted to go work there, and so they said, okay, we're going to transfer you from this division to that division. You can work on the missile system. Worked on the missile system for a while until I transferred off the Midway. Other story. So when you're on the ship, they want to recruit you. They want to get you to re-enlist. I had done 4 years, and I thought I was tired of the Navy. I said, you know, I'm not re-enlisting. I've had enough. I'm going home. You know, I was 23 years old at the time, 22, 23 years old. You know, I'm a young guy. I want to go home. I want to do whatever it is I'm going to do. And the recruiter comes aboard, the detailer actually comes aboard, and he says, well, Petty Officer Thompson, we can offer you any sea school you want and any coast you want. All you got to do is re-enlist. Sign the papers right here. I'm like, I'm never re-enlisted in your Navy. Then I went to lunch with a friend of mine at the bowling alley on base in Yokosuka, Japan, and he said, you know what, John, it sure beats selling Kenny shoes. I said, yeah, I'm going to re-enlist.
So how did you go from, you know, being reluctant to re-enlist to, you said you spent 20 years?
Yeah.
So what changed there?
Well, after the first 4, I mean, it was tough because I was stationed in Japan. And then I was thinking about the employment situation back home, and at the time, that would be 1981-ish, the employment situation was not great. You know, people were looking for work, and there were gas shortages and things like this, and it wasn't a good time to go seek employment. So I said, what the heck, you know, another 4 years, I get some technical training. And they did. They sent me to school for a year up in Chicago, where I met a lot of great guys. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast. Met guys in the German Navy. Had a ball up there. Learned a lot of stuff. And then I went to, after that, it was Charleston, South Carolina for about 8 years on different ships down there.
So, can you talk about some of the friendships you made while you were in the service?
Sure. Let's see. There's a guy, his name's Paul Barent. He lives in Elyria. I get those two confused, I shouldn't. But he lives out in Elyria. He works at the Ford plant. and Paul and I were stationed together up in Great Lakes. He was going to a school, I was going to a school. My dad worked with his brother, I think, at Ford at the time, and Paul was coming home. He was going to drive home from Chicago. Another story. So Paul says, he meets me, he says, hey, you're from Cleveland, I'm from Cleveland, let's drive home. We're going to drive all the way home from Chicago. It's about a 6-hour trip. I said, in what? He says, in my Jeep. He's got a cloth-covered Jeep. And at the time, it was December. So I was the smallest guy in the Jeep at the time, and there were 4 of us. And Paul's probably about 6'6", about 250. He's huge.
Oh my gosh.
And he's driving this Jeep, and it's really cold, and we're just, we're driving from Chicago to Cleveland. So yeah, so Paul was a good friend. I met a lot of other great people in the Navy. Some guys I'm still in touch with. A fella that I served with when I was up in Great Lakes the second time, and I actually taught the school that I went to the first time. Bill Yo, he's a retired Master Chief, which is an E9. That's as high as you can go in the enlisted ranks. And for whatever reason, Bill always thought I was great. He always thought he idolized me for whatever reason. I'm just a regular guy, but there was some funny stuff that I did, so whatever.
So when you were on the ships and when you were deployed, how did you keep in touch with your friends and family back home?
Back in the early days, all you did was write letters. We didn't have email. We didn't have sat phones. We didn't have any of that stuff. Writing letters and mail call was really important. Every time they called mail call, people were just, wow. This is the most important thing in the world, especially if you had a girlfriend back home or your family or what have you. You write letters. Towards the end of my career, they had email, and they had, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head now, but they actually had a telephone. I could dial that phone and I could call my wife back home. At the time, I was married at the end of my career. And the first time we went to test that phone, I was sitting as the combat systems officer of the watch, because I was a chief at the time. So I was up there in rank, so to speak. And they said, hey, Chief, try this phone. Well, who do you want me to call? I go, call your wife. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Hi, hon, we're just testing the phone. How's it going? You're out at sea. I said, yeah, I know I'm out at sea, but this thing works, right? She says, yeah. I said, okay, see you later, hon. Love you. Bye. Click. Because they didn't want me to stay on long. They just wanted me to test it.
Right. So when you were relying on the mail, how long would that take? Like if you sent a letter back home?
Days. Depends on where you're at. If you're import, let's say I was in Charleston, for example. If you're in Charleston, you just go to shore, pick up the phone, dial out, call, talk to somebody long distance, rates and everything apply, of course, but you do that. But letters, it depends on where you were in the world.
Gotcha. So what did you do? Okay, so what did you do in your free time when you were off duty?
We don't want to talk about that. Okay, let's talk about the good things I did. I actually did some good things. When I was on the Midway, another story, when I was a young guy, I think I was in 3rd class at the time, we went to a place called, we always do a community relations project, a Comrel project. And there was an orphanage called Cheongduk-Wan Orphanage in Korea. And when there's 4,000 people on the ship, and you're one of the most junior people on the ship, you don't get off for hours and hours and hours. On board an aircraft carrier, you stand in line for everything. And the higher up in rank you are, the faster you get to do things. And the lower in rank you are, you wait forever. But if you signed up to help out at Cheongduk-Wan Orphanage, you could be on the first Liberty boat getting off the ship. So I signed up, thinking, it'll be fun. I'll help out some kids. I'll do some. They wanted some basic carpentry done and some painting and stuff like that. And I have limited skills, but I can do that. Why not? So we went out and did that. And so when I signed up for that, my boss at the time, Gary Dunbar, who was my first supervisor in the Navy, Gary signed up to do it, and Gary got the Korean government in trouble because he went on national Korean television and said, you're treating these orphans horribly, and they've got pictures of them hanging their clothes on barbed wire, because there's barbed wire all around their place. And the lady that ran the orphanage actually knew John F. Kennedy. I'm like, wow. It was really cool. It was really cool. And then we went back a second time And they had moved her into a brand new building, and it was gorgeous. It was all really nice and everything, because he got on national TV and embarrassed the government, and he got in trouble for that. But he did the right thing. And then we lied about who we were, and we got from DRMO, Defense Utilization and Material Office, we got some dressers and nightstands and things like that for the kids, and brought them back and gave it to them. Loaded them up in a 2.5-ton truck, drove them over. Here you go.
Very nice.
So we did nice things, but it wasn't exactly legal.
So then talking about, ending your service and coming back home. So how did you return home?
Okay, another story. I met my wife through my father. My father worked at a place called Store Kit, and apparently he looked like my wife's father. And they said, "Oh, do you have any kids? Wouldn't it be funny if the kids looked alike?" And he was my stepfather. Okay, so we're not going to look alike or anything, but they showed a picture around. She started writing me. I started writing her. We wrote for a year before we met. When we met, we hit it off, and within about 6 months, we were married. So, but we wrote for a year. I was deployed at the time. That was the Grenada and Lebanon deployment.
Oh, wow.
And Libya, because Gaddafi had this line of death, and we were crossing it for freedom of navigation, all this stuff. He drew this line in the water, not a line in the sand, line in the water, and said, "If you cross this, we'll sink your ship." And I went, "Fine, whatever." Yeah, it's not going to happen.
So, you said you were in the service for 20 years. What made you decide to transition back to civilian life?
It was time, and I had kids. The last ship that I was on, the second to the last and the last ship I was on, the USS Ramage and USS Peterson, was stationed out of Norfolk, Virginia. The USS Ramage was a brand new commissioned ship, so I was going to be underway 80% of the time. So we decided that we were going to move back to Cleveland, because we were both from Cleveland. She's from Middleburg Heights. And we decided we'd buy a house. So we bought a house in Strongsville, where I live today. And my son was 2.5, I think. My first boy was 2.5. And I would come home, and I would see them briefly for a weekend or for a week, and then I'd go back to Norfolk. And it's about a 9 or 10 hour drive to Norfolk. And I'd be backing out of the driveway, and they'd be crying, "Ah," and I'd be crying, "Ah," So that's not good for having kids.
Right.
It's tough on a family.
So I'm assuming you were received well then when you decided to head home. What was their reactions?
Oh, they knew I was going to retire at 20. We talked about it.
Oh, okay.
They said she never would have moved to Cleveland had we not decided.
Gotcha.
When I had 18 years in it, I'm getting out after 20 because I've got kids, and it's not a good life for kids. Not seeing dad, and dad's gone a lot of times and stuff. It's hard on them.
So how did you readjust to being a civilian?
That was interesting. I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know what marketable skills I had. I knew that I had been a chief for 11 years, and I was good at what I did. I don't mind saying that a bit. I was very good at what I did. Okay, and how do you tell someone, "Yeah, I'm a chief gunner's mate. I work on guns. You got anything for me to work on over here? You got anything for me to do?" What do? It worked out. As it turns out, manufacturing has a lot of automated systems, and a gun is nothing but an automated system. It puts out a bullet, whereas the automated systems I work on now make widgets. So it all worked out. The Navy sent me to college. I got a 2-year degree and was able to parlay that into a bachelor's degree, and I was hoping that would help out. I was hoping I could become a teacher. I wanted to teach when I got out, but I found out how much teachers make initially, and I said I can't take that kind of a pay cut initially anyway. I've got a wife and kids and a house and a mortgage.
All right, so have you kept in contact or reunited with any of the people you served with?
Oh, sure. I see, believe it or not, Facebook. That's the only thing it's good for, as far as it's okay, it's fine, but younger people are more into that sort of thing. But I keep in contact with Navy friends and guys. They'll schedule reunions and talk about reunions, and hey, we're going to do this on this date. Right now, they're working on a reunion for the USS Mooseburger, which is a ship I served on in Charleston, and that's probably going to happen next year.
Very cool. So, are you a member of any veterans organizations?
VFW, yes. When you retire from the military, you go through about a week-long seminar, and different people come in and give little talks, and they teach you how to dress because you don't know how to dress. I mean, seriously, I wear the same thing every day for 20 years. You know, I don't have to think about it. They say, okay, right now, cuffs are in, pleated pants are in. So you can tell when I got out. It was 97. And you know, you want the break of the pant to be this on the shoe, and they had a guy come in and he's explaining all this to us and how to write a resume and this sort of thing. So it helped out a lot.
Very good. So what have you done since separating from the military?
Through a headhunter, I got a job with a company called Crane Pro Services. I worked there for 3 years. And then one of my customers was a place called High Level Industries. And one day I went in there and I was tired of traveling because I wouldn't get home till 10 o'clock at night sometimes. Sometimes I'd be in Southern Ohio driving back home at 8 o'clock at night. And I can't see my kids. You know, why did I get out of the Navy? This is stupid. So I asked that customer at the time, who also happened to be an ex-Navy guy, the boss there, Ken Smith. I said, Kenny, are you hiring? He goes, how much you want? I go, how much you offering? And that's how I got a job at High Level. High Level no longer exists. Swagelock bought High Level. So I work at a place called Swagelock in Strongsville, Ohio, 2.25 miles from my house.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how do you think that your experience in the service has impacted your life?
It's what I identify with. Oh, jeez. Not supposed to get emotional, you big fat old guy. I really liked the Navy. I was part of something bigger. You know, I was important for a brief moment in time. I felt good about it. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I cry when I sing the national anthem too. Okay. Ask me something silly.
Well, I don't know that there's any silly questions left, but what are some life lessons that you learned? I guess those could be silly.
No. You get out of it what you put into it. Whatever you put into something, that's what you get out of it. You know, if you try 100% to do this, you can do it. That's probably the biggest one. That's what they always told me. They said, you know, you get out of it what you put into it. And it's true. I learned that I shut my mouth a lot more than I open it. Some people would say I haven't learned that lesson yet, but that's okay. Life is still good. I still make a good buck, and I still can afford to pay for my car and my house and my family.
What message would you like to leave for future generations that'll see this video?
A lot of people think the military's not such a great place, or that it's going to be, you know, it's for losers or whatever you want to call it, because the statistics show that most people that go into the military are lower middle class or lower class. They're looking for a job, they're looking for money. I was looking for money for college, even though I suppose I could have taken out loans or my folks could have afforded it, but I didn't want them to have to pay for it. That's the way I am. I don't like anybody, you know, having to take care of me. I'd rather take care of them. But the military is a good place to grow up. It'll teach you a lot. You'll learn a lot. And you don't have to stay in for 20 years. Very few people do. I'm part of the 1%, if that stay in for that long. But it worked out for me. Every time I went to re-enlist, they'd offer me more. Hey, we'll do this for you. And once you're in 12 years, when I married my wife, I had 10 years in, I said, look, I'm staying in the Navy for another 10 years. You're married to the Navy, you're not married to me. They have a saying in the Navy that the Navy wife's the toughest job in the Navy. It's true. It's harder on them than it is on you. Because you just go to sea and, you know, you do your thing and you work and you're good at it and you have a good time. But for them, it's, and for your family, for your kids, it's tough. So do it while you're young. Go in for a couple of years, you know, have fun.
So I guess going off of that, how often were you able to go back and see your family?
Well, remember, I wasn't married for the first 10 years I was in, basically. So, you know, seeing mom and dad, that's nice. But it doesn't equate to being a young person who's married. It's much tougher on them. So I'd get back whenever I could. I mean, we were, when I got married, let's see, I was stationed on board the USS Mooseburger Then I was transferred summarily to the USS John Rogers. I called my wife from Gitmo, where we have a training base down there. I said, good news, bad news. Good news is I'm coming home. Bad news is I'm deploying in 30 days. You're married to the Navy, not to me. So that's the reality of it.
Well, you know, we've covered everything that
Okay.
we need to cover, but is there anything that you feel that you want to add to this?
I'll give you one more funny story. It's my favorite story. Got a lot of stories. So when I went to join when I was thinking about, even before I was thinking about joining the Navy, let's back up. So I'm in high school, and a friend of mine, Tom Tabor, he comes up to me, he says, John, I'm going to the Marine Corps Reserves. He says, why don't you go in with me on the buddy program? I'm never joining the military. 20 years later. Yeah, he got out after his stint in the reserves, after about 2 years, 4 years, or whatever it was. And I was still there, doing what I do. Like I said, I don't mind saying I was good at it.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
You're welcome.